Welcome to Education Perspectives. I am your host, Liza Holland. This is a podcast that explores the role of education in our society from a variety of lenses. Education needs to evolve to meet the needs of today and the future. Solving such huge issues requires understanding. Join me as we begin to explore the many perspectives of education. Welcome, everybody, back to Education Perspectives. We are so excited to have Patty McGee, who is recognized as a literacy consultant, speaker, and educator. And we are also very, very happy to know that she is the author of a marvelous book all around grammar instruction. So we'll get into that a little bit more. But again, very much appreciate you being here. Need to kick you off with our 30,000-foot question.
Okay.
So why do we as a society invest in education from your perspective?
Oh, gosh, I have a couple of different responses to that. I think there are people who willingly invest in education because they know that there is possibility for those being educated, their futures, their lives, their learning possibilities. And then I think there's a group that funds education because it's the law and it's in taxes. And there are a lot of different board meetings over my 31 years. I can see how much pressure is put on budgets to keep them as lean as possible because there's been concessions that, yes, I know I have to pay this, but don't make me pay anything extra. So I believe there are many people who do so happily. And sometimes it's because it keeps their property values higher. But I also think that there's a group that believes and knows that education can be the answer.
That's a great response and very insightful because there really are different sides to the aisle there, aren't there? But I think, me personally, our democracy doesn't work unless we have an educated public. So I love that question because everybody always has a slightly different answer. So speaking of education, what drew you to education and why grammar?
Oh, well, I just always admired, I should say, my teachers, especially the ones who helped me understand things that were very difficult to understand. And especially those that I remember when I was young. And funny enough, the school that I went to growing up is the school I started teaching in. So,
oh, wow.
Yes, my first grade teacher became the principal. And so she taught me how to read. And when I joined the school, she taught me how to teach. And
wow, how exciting.
Yeah. And what drew me to grammar was for a very long time and immediately a problem of practice for me. I did what I thought I was supposed to do. I can honestly say that I did not receive any instruction in any of my degrees that I've gotten around teaching grammar.
Wow.
And I wonder how many places not just teach grammar, but teach how to teach grammar, because there hasn't been much evolution of how we teach grammar over the years. I think there's a lot of things we've tried, and many of those things, just because of the tone around grammar, may or may not work. And it was because it was a problem of practice when I started in the mid-90s. I just kept thinking about it. It kept gnawing at the back of my head. And I just kept an extra ear or eye out for, does that seem more effective? Is that something I should play with? Is that something I should consider? Until finally, I want to say it's about 8 years ago, probably more than that, maybe 10 years ago, I was consulting in a school and we were writing curriculum for the grammar standards. And the supervisor of ELA in that district got up and taught us all about grammar in a way that made us all understand. Of course, there were some grammarians in the room, but he reached those of us who wouldn't consider ourselves grammarians. And he's my co-author now because we said back 10 years ago, I think we should write a book on this one day. And
that's so great.
Yeah, it's awesome. So I have always been on the lookout, and this has been a process for quite a long time of really codifying the approach that I believe is currently the most effective.
So tell me more about that, because you're right. There's two very different skill sets, knowing grammar and being able to teach someone to know about grammar. I think back on my own experience, and so much of it is just, I know it because I learned it so long ago. It's now just a part of me and how I write and whatnot. But now I can't really remember the rules and why, but I do it. Mm-hmm. So tell me about what you're finding is working better, is working to, kind of keep kids engaged in it, because some people are like, it's a dying art form. We need to make sure to drill this more. And I'm not sure that's the way to do it.
I agree it's a dying art form, but I don't agree that drill and worksheets are the best method in order for people to learn how to use grammar artfully. And that's really what we're looking for. And so here's the difference. And this is where the name of the book came in, Not Your Granny's Grammar, because I was trying to describe this to somebody who said, well, what's the difference between your approach to grammar and other grammar? And I said, well, for generations, we've been handed worksheets to identify or complete diagramming sentences, but we never really had a bridge built from those experiences into writing, nor did we have a variety of entry points to be able to learn grammar. We just thought it was a static set of rules. And so the person asked me, so what are you saying? I said, I'm saying this is not your granny's grammar. And that's how the title came out. And so
that's wonderful.
I have found that when I have problems of practice instructionally, that yes, I read a lot and learn a lot from experts in the field. I also look outside of the school building and I say, well, what do we do naturally to learn something? And I love to refinish furniture with these special paints and waxes. And I just looked at that and I'm like, what do I do? Well, first I get curious, like which paints might work here, and hypothesize what I think would be the best treatment for that piece of furniture. And then I would go to a store that sold those paints and waxes. And I asked for feedback. And that person also demonstrated for me step by step how to use the paints in the way that I'm envisioning. So explicit teaching. And then before I would paint the furniture, I would play on different pieces of scrap wood or cardboard, or, just to kind of perfect what it is that I was trying to do before actually applying it to the furniture. And then I would revise and adjust. And that's what's great about these paints is you can. And then after finishing something, I often reflected and would say, like, what do I really think worked here? What things do I need to work on? Or what am I still curious about? Which would start me in the next cycle of learning. And I came to realize that all of those entry points were missing from grammar instruction.
Wow.
Right? There wasn't any
That's
curiosity.
Pretty powerful, right? Yeah, no kidding. So how are you infusing all of that wonderful, amazing process into the grammar instruction?
Well, we do all of those things in one day. I'm kidding. We don't.
I was going to have a lot of follow-up questions.
End this podcast. No, I like to think of grammar learning happening over time, accumulating like a snowball within a unit where we study related concepts. And so I believe that the place to start, even if we're starting a new grammar approach in the middle of a year, is at the sentence level. And I usually recommend simple, compound, and complex sentences and studying those. And first, just getting a bird's eye view of like how an author uses them. How often are they used? because I'll have already done the identification on a text to say, like, the plain print is a simple sentence. The italics is compound and underlined is complex. And let's just look at this with a partner and think, what was this author thinking? What's the effect of this combination of sentences? And that's very short, maybe 5 minutes. It just like wets our whistle a little bit before we start to dive into, say, simple and compound sentences. And that's where the pattern that I shared with you before of getting curious and hypothesizing, looking at the differences between the two, then having explicit instruction on both what makes up a simple sentence and how we can use two simple sentences to make compound sentences. So it's explicit instruction with step-by-step how-to. And then after that is a couple of days. And when I say days, I mean 10-minute pockets of time. No slides needed, no bling necessary. If there's anything that we need, perhaps it's projecting a document or it is scissors to cut things out. I love manipulatives in grammar. It's probably my favorite part, where kids get together in partnerships and trios and play with whatever manipulative that is in order to create, in this case, compound sentences using simple sentences. And that kind of play is very different than a game. There is no winner or loser in this. And that really helps when it comes to learning and knowing and making mistakes without feeling a sense of shame or embarrassment. Where games, there's a winner and a loser. So let's say, who can point? Actually, I did this with fly swatters thinking this would work. Who can swat the noun in this sentence first? And of course, the kids that struggled with that would always be the loser. So what was I doing? And there's already enough shame around grammar. There's so much
shame in school in general, and grammar is a high point of it. I totally agree with you. And really the skill set that we need is to be able to do that iteration and that making a mistake and trying it again and making it a little bit better and a little bit better. So that's a magical thing to bring to this process.
Yes. So with that play, that I put up little barriers where there's no shame. We follow those few days with a time to reflect. What do you know for sure about simple and compound sentences? What are you still curious about? Which is inevitably, there's somebody who says, and I've taught this in second grade all the way up through high school. There's always somebody who says, can we have 3 simple sentences in a sentence? And I'm like, let's explore that. Or some other great things. Like, I'd like to use the word because to put these 2 sentences together. And my response is, I can teach you how to do that, but it wouldn't be a compound sentence. So there's that point of curiosity of, I'm not going to tell you everything you need to know. I am going to tell you some things that you need to know on that explicit teach day. And then I'm going to be the concierge that helps you discover them on your own.
Oh, that's so magical. So so often we silo teaching into, okay, this is a curriculum that we're going to do. Now we're going to do this one. Now we're going to do this one. This, it seems to me, would lend itself to infusing into any kind of literary curriculum.
Yeah.
Right. When you're talking about plot and setting and all those other kinds of things, grammar is another way that you can look at it and be curious. Have you found that to be the case, or is it how you like to do it?
Yeah. In fact, it kind of came to me post-publication, where I started to think about grammar manipulatives and how we can use them in different content areas. So, for example, one of the manipulatives that I like to use in grammar is a sort. So we might create a sort around nouns, verbs, and those that can act as both. And with the 7th grade social studies group in a nearby middle school, I was like, I bet you we can use this sort to teach content, to introduce content while using grammar. So what we did was we created a sort based on ancient China, which was the next unit. And we put phrases and clauses about a time period in ancient China. And the first thing we asked the kids to do in partnerships or trios, that's essential, by the way, was to sort them in whatever categories they wanted to. So in one situation, it was good, bad, mid. So, very
Okay.
kid.
Yeah.
And then we challenged them to sort into phrases and clauses. And of course, we reminded them we weren't going to send them on this sorting adventure without just giving them a little reminder. There is a verb in a clause and a noun that goes with it, where in a phrase, it doesn't have that. And so they looked so closely at the nouns and the verbs of ancient China. So it was like people and places that they were learning, the actions that were happening during this historical period, what the outcomes were by studying it with a grammatical eye.
Oh, I love that.
It was so cool. And then we asked the kids to now even take your clauses and put them into dependent and independent clauses. And of course, explained, you'll likely see a word at the front that makes it dependent that might be a word you've heard before. And we give some examples. They sort them again into those two types of clauses. And then the last step is to compare one group to another group, set them up in a group of those pairs or trios and to see if they have the same thing in their sorts. And if they don't, deliberate over where they go and why. It's just so rich in learning about content, learning about grammar, and also it's practically free.
And all that critical thinking, holy moly, I love that.
It was really something special. And since then, I've done other content work in the same way. So we can do this with any type of content and any categories that we'd like to use. So it just is a win-win in so many ways. I love that it's free, practically. I love that all we need to do is input whatever we'd like into a grid, cut them out, and share them. And then give challenges with them.
That is so awesome. Tell me a little bit more about why it's so critical that kids are working in groups rather than individually.
Yeah. Well, first of all, standard grammar. Actually, I'm going to back into this question a little bit.
No problem.
I think about grammar in three buckets. That there's spoken grammar. That's by community. That's by homes. A lot of the grammar in my family comes from the things that me and my siblings said when we were young, or my own kids said when we were young. And it's not grammatically correct, but it is our grammatically correct and our way of saying things. And communities have the same. And it's beautiful because it really can impact the other two buckets. The center bucket is, I would say, what I call book grammar, where it's grammar usage intentionally for the audience. So if our audience is very academic, we turn to that third bucket of standard grammar. So whatever the standards are in each state or whatever style guide you're following, depending on how old or young you are.
Chicago IPA. Mm-hmm.
Yep. And here's the thing that happens. Spoken grammar influences book grammar. And the author is intentionally deciding based on their audience, how much of each will be included in here or not. So it's like artfully creating on the page.
That is so amazing because grammar is so often presented as a black or white. And you're really talking about it as a storytelling device. I love that. That is so smart.
It's like living, breathing.
Yeah. And changing.
Yes, exactly. In fact, I took some time to just find quotes from different centuries, starting with the 16th century, and just listed them out. And you can hear that we almost don't understand the grammar from the 16th century. And as we get closer to today, it starts to make more sense to us. And the rules were different. Like, for example, back in the 16th century, they would capitalize their most important words in their sentence. Rather than today, we capitalize names.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, the evolution of grammar as an art form, as it were. I mean, it's an art and it's a science, right? But yeah, I could see that. And over time, as things change, little things like punctuation can completely change the meaning of a sentence. And I love that with the choice of how it's represented. Interesting. That makes me think of so many of the things I read, and I'm like, what is the author doing with this?
Yes, exactly. So we hear a lot of spoken grammar, so we're very good with that. If we're reading or are read to, we're then exposed to book grammar. But standard grammar is rarely part of our discussion. Talking out loud, using grammar that aligns with the standards aloud helps co-build grammar know-how. If we're solo, it's not letting us do that. And I can tell you that in most of my experiences in being taught grammar, and most of the time when I was in the classroom, it was a silent experience, unless it was the teacher talking. And by using oral language to develop grammar knowledge, both by hearing it, but also co-constructing meaning through all of these entry points that I described, is highly effective. We're using the social brain.
You know, a lot of my work is kind of around the durable skills that employers are asking for. And this just really strikes me as a really effective way to build some of those skills, particularly in the communication and flat out storytelling space that a lot of kids, unfortunately, coming into the work world today have not had as much of an opportunity to build. And boy, just this change in how you approach it would over time build so many of those skills, the collaboration amongst, in between, the critical thinking, the communication, all of it. What a brilliant way to teach. Very, very cool. What are the biggest challenges that you find? Because this is a very different way to approach teaching grammar. Do you run into roadblocks with people about, well, this is the way we've done it forever? What kind of challenges have you had in trying to make this change in how grammar is taught?
Yeah, I would say the biggest challenge that I'm finding is asking teachers to let go of some things, to let go of the lesson plan design, and only think of this as grammar experiences that are connecting to the former experience and helping build knowledge over time. And to do so, please bring as few things as possible, just the necessities, to this work. I would project something perhaps that I've already made, like a chart. I might write out a chart on chart paper. The manipulatives I like to print, and if needed, cut. I don't want a set of slides that is going to, number one, take the teacher a whole lot of time to create. And number two, almost take us away from being really responsive and curious. When there's things that are like the boss of what we're doing, and that can be slides, that's the part that I feel has been the hardest, is letting things go, keeping it simple. When I demo for teachers, they're like, that's it? I'm like, that's it on my part. But look at the students. Like, there was a 7th grade classroom. I have so many of these cute stories, but I was personally teaching a number of experiences. And I told them it's a new way, perhaps, of learning grammar. And when I was walking out, there was a 7th grade boy that stood up and said, "That's so much better than the old way."
I love it.
Yes, me too.
I love that.
Yeah.
So as you get up into, because it seems to me that grammar is something that there would just be a value in having exposures regularly over time, as opposed to, okay, in fourth grade, we're going to teach grammar, and then we're off to something else. How does your teaching evolve when you get up to high school or, maybe even a collegiate type of a level?
Yeah.
Do you get more into the nuance of authors and how they are choosing to use their grammar, that sort of thing?
Definitely. That's why I really like to start off with usually mentor texts that I've had to revise myself, because usually most printed mentor texts are created by an author who chooses to use or misuse grammar. So it's really hard to find something that is grammatically aligned to the standards. And even something like academic studies that I've read still insert in just the right places through anecdotal data, some spoken grammar. And so knowing that, are we teaching grammar so that we get the answers right on the SAT? Or are we teaching grammar for usage? Or are we doing both? And I would argue that both, all the way up and through the grade levels and even at the collegiate level, because many times MLA is the guide we use in middle school and high school. And then sometimes or eventually we're faced with APA. And my second book was Chicago style. So if I had the chance to play with the concepts, getting curious about what makes Chicago style in this area, how do we do it? Somebody teaching me having a chance to play so that I'm not going straight from you taught it to me. Now I'm creating exactly what I'm supposed to on the page. We need space to play and try. And then if there are further queries, we can say when we get older, perhaps, then we ask them. And that way it's grammar for usage. But it's also valid that we want kids to be able to do well on an assessment of whatever grammatical things are being assessed. And so we do expose them to the types of questions that will be asked. I want to say, though, teaching for usage makes teaching for the test easier.
I can totally see that. I really can, because honestly, to me, a test is a byproduct to some extent. I mean, I know in education that probably is taboo, but to me, it's, do you understand and can you use and apply this type of information? And the reality is, when you graduate, it's not going to be the SAT or ACT types of things. It's going to be, can you communicate effectively with your collaborators in your workspace? Can you communicate effectively? Maybe you go into academia with fellow academicians. Can you back it down to, for marketing and communications, they say to bring it down to an 8th grade level. And grammar is so much a part of that, those nuances and who can understand it. I think that's kind of magical, because you're right. I mean, it's kind of been that, it's grammar time in school. And realistically, that's what makes your communication more powerful. I was always the why kid. Why do I need to know this?
Yes.
And to me, that's the answer, is it will make your communication so much more effective if everybody who's reading it can understand it in the same way.
Yes, 100%. And also, there are some things that I would like to either add or remove from just the culture around grammar. I would like to remove every sign or mug that says, I'm silently correcting your grammar, or any t-shirt or flag or whatever it might be that says grammar police. Or I've seen in classrooms, usually middle school, a list of fatal flaws of grammar usage. It's like punitive and intimidating and exactly. And so I'd like to replace that with grammar is art. Just the way a paintbrush is to a painter, grammar is to writing, to a writer.
Just like a painter uses geometry, you have all these rules and whatnot within grammar, but how you apply it is going to be different in many different use cases. That's so beautiful. I love that. I'm really going to have to, this came up fairly quickly, so I've not had a chance to read your book yet, but now I'm going to have to go read this book. This sounds really marvelous.
Thank you.
So if you were talking to decision makers, and you can define whoever that is. It could be legislators setting standards and curriculum. It could be principals, could be even just teachers. What would you want them to know about this new way of approaching the teaching of grammar and how the kids respond to it?
Well, first, at the legislative level, I would like each state to let me get my hands on their grammar standards. Like, I'm in New Jersey, and in New Jersey, we have compound sentences to be learned in second grade, and then in sixth grade to vary our sentence structure. We have skipped over complex sentences, and then by seventh grade, we need to know, I don't know if it's still there, but in many cases, are the compound complex sentences. There are so many gaps in the continuity that can be created, and the grade levels in which we're expecting mastery for some things, and the knowledge that, as writers, we are conductors of an orchestra. We are trying to make meaning on the page, and we need to know when the flutes come in and how to play a flute. And we need to know how loud the drums are going to be, but also know all of that percussion. And we need to know when the horns are going to come in and which ones. And we need to be the person to make that all happen. So when we forget a period, which is driving people crazy, and I understand why, but when we forget a period, it's not there at the moment because they're conducting the flutes. They haven't gotten to the trumpets yet. And it's not to say we can't just say, okay, let's do a 2-minute edit today. Look for punctuation. It still gives them the chance, but it also allows the conducting of the orchestra.
I love the whole metaphor. Maybe it's an analogy. I'm not really sure. Isn't that terrible? But that is a wonderful way to look at all of this application. And again, pulling it away from this is one specific standard piece that we need to check boxes on to a layered, multidisciplinary type of an approach around communication. I just think that's pretty magical.
Me too. Here's one little thing that I haven't mentioned that stands in the way of the magic. Aside from the shame that I was talking about, teachers also feel a sense of shame for not knowing grammar. It's hard to admit. And when I did my own anecdotal research around what are the needs in grammar, just because it was one-on-one, the thing that rose to the top is I don't understand grammar myself. So how am I going to teach it? And because of that, it shows us two things. One, for most of the people, and these are teachers, so obviously they've gotten degrees, most of them multiple, that the type of grammar instruction that was used in the days of yore wasn't effective for most people. And two, that a new approach, but also just an acceptance that grammar is not simply memorized. There are things that will be memorized. It's not the route to go. It is part of the route. It's a tool on the route, but it is not memorization for everything. It's also, that's like really low on the depths of knowledge too.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And again, what are we doing this for? We're doing this to prepare people, students for real life communication and whatnot. And the more I think about you talking about the punitive piece of it, the more that just really brings power, because the teachers are feeling that they're going back in time and feeling that shame. Yeah. And now it's being resurfaced again. And so they want to get through it as soon as possible because it's a painful experience. And what you're suggesting is really making it much more of a magical discovery experience. And what a wonderful flip.
Isn't it?
It really, really is. So I do have one last question for you, because I recently saw a post on Facebook advocating for bringing back Schoolhouse Rock.
Oh,
what are your thoughts about Schoolhouse Rock?
I think if they're part of broader experience of learning, like conjunction, junction, what's your function? I would totally love that. If that's the only thing, then it's not enough. But music around grammar to help us remember, yeah, I'm all for it.
Me too, because it was just so much fun. And that was the piece that made me ask the question, was thinking about that was the time that I had fun with grammar when I was growing up and learning. Yeah. And so maybe just bringing back that little bit of fun is the workaround to the end of our conversation here, because that is going to be a magical piece for a lot of students. So thank you so much for all you do.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. It's a really nice discussion.
Well, it was a delight to have you on Education Perspectives. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Education Perspectives. Feel free to share your thoughts on our Facebook page. Let us know which education perspectives you would like to hear or share. Please subscribe and share with your friends.